So thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're going to be talking about men's mental health predominantly. We're just going to spend a few seconds really waiting so that we can get as many people live as possible and give people a chance just to log on and join us. We can't wait to have this discussion in a minute. We've been looking forward to these guests for a long time.
So tonight we're welcoming Phil Askew and Jamie Robbins, who are life coaches, and they also do an excellent podcast called Safe Harbour, which is on men's mental health. So welcome.
Hello.
You. We go over to each of you and just give you a little bit of a kind of, you can give us kind of a bit of background as to kind of, where you're coming from and, basically essentially what you're doing day to day, really. So we'll start with you, Phil. That'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I am a coach and traditionally trained life coach. And it was interesting because when we had that discussion beforehand, you were like, most people don't know what a life coach is. It's funny, when you live in a world of coaches, everyone knows what everyone does. So it's interesting. So maybe the conversation will go there as we move forward. Like sort of demystifying what coaching is. But I think predominantly it's safe for me to say that. So both Jamie and I work with human beings who are maybe stuck at a crossroads, or they're looking for some clarity. They're looking for some ease of thinking. Maybe their mindset is kind of stuck in a way of thinking. But when we approach it, or when we work with those people, we generally tend to offer up some clarity and sort of reflect back some answers and some suggestions on what they can do. We don't necessarily suggest, well, I'm talking from my own standpoint here, the way that I show up, we don't as a rule suggest things to people, but we kind of offer up a safe space where people can explore options and routes of approach that they might not have seen before. So in general, I work with one-to-one clients, and I also work with companies and small teams of people as well who kind of want to get some clarity and direction. Yeah.
Great. Perfect.
Jamie?
He's very good as well.
Excellent. It's your back one. It's good.
He's there, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, great.
My name's Jamie, and I work predominantly with men. And that came about at the beginning of lockdown, actually, when I was finding lockdown really tough as a man. And I found that this calling to work with men was really strong. So I still work with women occasionally, but what my flag in the air is my name's Jamie, and I help men. I work with men. And I find that during this time, coming out of lockdown, especially, men are, I think, more and more open to the idea of working with a coach. I think it's becoming less and less a taboo, for men to ask for help. And coaching is a less heavy way of working towards or working out of being unstuck, rather than therapy. I think therapy kind of has, in my experience, has a heaviness to it a little bit, whereas coaching is like forward facing and exciting and fun, and more accessible. So I work with men for that reason.
Great. And how did the podcast come about for both of you? How did you end up doing that?
So Jamie and I were friends beforehand. We did some training together, and and we can riff on this, Jamie, you and I both together like this. But I think the way it kind of started, it was the first lockdown, the first version of lockdown 1.0, if you like. And we were both struggling, psychologically speaking. I was just like, I don't know what is going on. There was a whole load of fear out in the world, and I saw it at this real dark period of time, and I didn't know how to put it into words. I didn't know how to handle it because it was unprecedented. And Jamie was there, a good friend of mine, where we've been doing training together in the past. And what we started to do was use WhatsApp on our phones just to check in with each other with voice memos. So literally using a kind of men's group kind of methodology of saying, just checking in the morning and checking out in the evening. So checking in just by me sending a voice memo to Jamie saying, hey, mate, this is how I'm doing. I'm struggling a bit. I'm noticing that physically I feel a bit overwhelmed. I feel tired, and this is how I'm doing. So basically a non-judgmental space where I could share with a good friend of mine who I knew wouldn't come back with suggestions, but he'd take it on board, and he'd then come back with maybe some reflections on what he just heard, but then also he'd check in with me as well. So I would then hold space, as we call it in the coaching world, where I'd listen to Jamie and without judgment, without responses like, this is what you should be doing, but actually just holding space for each other. And we realized that this was an amazing structure that was doing us the world of good. And it was like kind of grounding us and bringing us this clarity of thought and a sense of safety and ease that someone else had our backs. And that's when we thought, right, okay, there must be thousands of men who are struggling with this right now, thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands. So why don't we sort of take this public so that we can somehow model a normalizing process that it's okay for men to share their innermost thoughts and what they're struggling with each other. And it doesn't mean that you're weak or you're overly emotional. You're struggling. We're struggling like everybody else. So the reason for us doing the podcast and sending it out into the world was predominantly so that we could model having intimate, raw, open conversations to strong, men together, and it'd be okay to do so. Yeah.
It's a bit like you managed to basically put words, basically what other people were feeling at that time, and I think a lot of men hearing that could probably think, actually, I can relate to this. Actually, that's how I'm feeling. Maybe they couldn't put the words to it before.
Yeah, and it's not scripted. We just choose a topic like addiction or joy or whatever, and we just hit record and we start talking. And then when we think the arc of the conversation is finished, then we say goodbye and record another one. So it's
very relatable. It's very relatable when you listen to it. I think even for women, actually, I would say that actually we have those, you listen to it and it's nice because you allow people to feel it's okay to feel that things are a bit rubbish, that they're overwhelmed, that you can't cope. And I think that's really important. And you make it more normal for people to be able to express that. And I think it's a really beautiful podcast. It's really, really good.
There's some real emotion. There's some authentic emotion, some tears. There's some, we go to some real edges. We're talking about topics that are, I remember we did one on addiction, the last episode, and I was really nervous about it because I'd had issues around drinking problems in my past, and I was like, do I really want to go there? But Phil said, let's do it. Let's just do it, man. Let's go to that edge and really show up. And Phil coaches me in that episode and really brings out how difficult that was for me. And I guess that is relatable. That's why people listen to it, because us men and women, of course, but as men, my own experience, that's what I turn to when times get tough. I pick up a beer and then another one and then another one. And it was interesting to really just go there. And that's what we do with Safe Harbor, is give permission for other men to listen and go, yeah, these guys are just like me. They're just normal guys like me. Not trying to teach them. Sorry?
It's the authenticity. I think that's very, very important. I think that side where people can relate to it, because I think we've shown a lot of public personas that are very perfect, I think, on the outside. And it's nice to hear the difficulties and the struggles, but then see how you've come through those and how you've dealt with them. I think, it's very good. It's very powerful.
Yeah. We're imperfect human beings in a perfect world. I love that saying, we're as men trying to, we're surrounded by images, and we're not constantly feeling we're not good enough, because there's this constant perception that we've got to be strong and we've got to, man up and don't cry and push all that stuff down and, look good out in the world. And actually what we're trying to do with Safe Harbor is say to men, it's okay. It's okay to not be perfect, because none of us are. We're just men doing our best in the world, being the best dad we can, the best business runner we can, the best partner, and we're going to balls it up sometimes, and that's okay. And we're just giving permission. We're giving permission.
I think things have really...
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think things have really escalated and been compounded over this pandemic period by way of men finding that there's a necessity to ask for help, because they entered into that phase of, I don't know who the hell I am, and my identity sits with my work. And so I'm being told that I have to stay at home with my family, who I've maybe never spent this amount of time with. And my identity lies in the role and responsibility that I hold at work. I'm a line manager or I'm a creative director. And if I don't do that, am I valuable? Am I worthwhile? And how am I struggling in this totally new world? It's a completely parallel world. And what we wanted to do, I think, was to we set intentions as coaches, and when we're about to facilitate workshops or experiences, we set intentions for the outcomes that we want for this experience. So we don't necessarily have a specific set way, this is what we're going to do, like for a workshop or for a podcast. And we model that, and we set intentions saying, this is what we want to dive into, and this is where we want to end up. This is the clarity we want to kind of get to the end result around, not knowing the answers, but just we want to say that we visited that territory and explored it. And I think that's what our podcast did, like through real-time conversation. And Jamie and I know each other so well anyway, we didn't want to hold anything back. It was no censorship, but it was all about normalizing this sort of flavor of conversation, not just for men, but for human beings.
I think it's interesting when you talk about the different types of conversation you can have with people and the way you can be present for people in different ways. I think that's very powerful, and it sounds like that's a part of the coaching that you do as well. Bringing that, I think, just being present for someone and caring how they actually are, and when someone says, "How are you feeling?" and actually wanting to know the answer, that in itself is very, very healing for people. We find that too, very, very much. Yeah. Probably if we ask you, we've had a few questions coming up to this. If we ask you, why do you think it is that men find it so hard to talk about their emotions and their mental health?
Oh, we got a podcast on that. We have an episode on that, I believe.
Good.
Why can't men
shorter
talk?
time.
Yeah. Oh, right. You don't
Not
go
35 minutes, please.
Jamie, what do you reckon?
Oh, crikey, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's a 10-minute response. But if I try and bottom line it, why don't men? I guess we don't get permission. We don't get the opportunity very often. You know, men typically, when men get together, we meet down the pub or on a squash court or on a football pitch or, you know, any kind of social setting. And whenever there's alcohol involved or we're knocking a thing around, we don't have time to slow down and really like speak from here. Men's, in my experience, we spend most of our time speaking from up here, working stuff out, trying to figure it out, trying to give advice. And actually, if we slow down as men and we speak from here, that's when we can really talk. So I don't think we get the opportunity very often, and that's why I think a lot of men are coming to coaching. Yeah. Because in coaching, that's one of the first things I do is get men out of here and down into this unfamiliar place of speaking from our hearts, from like what really matters to you about that. How many men have been asked what's important to you about that?
Yes, because you're taught to do that from when you're young. Is that something you're taught to do when you're younger?
Is it
something? Do you think that you end up here because that's the way you're
sorry, yeah.
to be? Yeah, because that's
so.
The way
yeah, because we want to figure stuff out. We want to be in control of what's in the future, and you know, work our way out of a problem. And instead of just stopping and pausing for a minute and like closing our eyes and like having men literally close their eyes and shut up for a minute, like for 2 or 3 minutes, and just listen to what's going on in here, is rare. Yeah. So when we get that opportunity, like when some of the men come on the Safe Harbor talking circles that we did during lockdown, men had never sat in a circle before. Like some men would come and they'd never sat and shared their feelings in front of anyone, never mind in front of a bunch of men. So when they were given that opportunity in a safe container, a safe space, it's like 30, 40 years of like undo the tap, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Vulnerability and emotion came out. And it's like, okay, that's 5 minutes. Next man. We're like, whoa, hang on, 5 minutes. Can I have another go? You know?
Just to outline, well, that is just building on what Jamie's saying, just the Safe Harbor circles were some things that we were trying out, which are, in essence, we would have maybe between 5 and 7 men on Zoom who would come along, never done any personal development work, never done any sort of coaching work necessarily, but they'd come along and they'd be on Zoom, you know, in boxes on top of each other in the pandemic times. And we're facilitators of this kind of work. So we've had training in holding what are called circles. And literally, even though we weren't sat in a circle, metaphorically we were. And the structure of it was that we would give each other as if we're holding the stick. And while we're holding the stick, that person would then have maybe 5 minutes to just share exactly what is going on for them without interruption from any of the other people. And once that person's finished, you know, they would say something like, I'm complete, or I'm finished. And we would say, do you want any reflection on that? As in, I noticed that when you said this, it made me feel like this. So it's not in response to what they're saying. We're not offering up solutions or things that you must go away and do, which I think men are very predisposed to doing. Here's a solution for you. We want to fix it. But when that man has shared, there's often a space in the room and there's a silence, and then we move on to the next person. And before we know it, we've gone around all the people, and it's incredibly emotional. And when we did it, Jamie, the first one we did, here guys turned out we'd never done anything like this. And we were just getting messages saying that was incredible. Thank you so much. And actually we did very little. Yeah. What we did do well, I think, was what we call hold space incredibly safely. And we designed the alliance, which is another methodology we do, where we say this is confidential. We just have people feel at ease immediately. So once they're able to share, I think men just want desperately a space where they feel safe enough to share without judgment. And their inner critic, which is something we can maybe talk about further down the line, their inner critic is incredibly fearful of potential shame. Like with most people, we have the shame avoidant inner critic. And so with the men sharing circles, it was like, we just want to say that we will not judge you. There's no judgment here. We're going to share as well. So we're normalizing it. And we just think that it was just a really beautiful, a beautiful safe space for men to be able to share in 5 minutes. Yeah.
It's also knowing they've got that support as well. Because, I mean, it's all very well sharing, but knowing that their environment isn't going to judge you and you are going to get support from it, I suppose that let their guard down, really, isn't it? Because I always think that possibly the guard's a little high.
Women get more used to talking
around with a mask on, don't we? We all, men and women, walk around with the appropriate version of ourselves.
So not a literal one. I'm confused by that. The non-mask.
Not anymore,
That's good.
Yeah.
So we've got a question that's come in now from one of our viewers. I'd love to ask you, actually, I really want to know the answer as well, which is, do you have any suggestions on how best to approach a man about exploring the idea of talking to somebody or reaching out for help? And of course, yes, I love the bit, which is, of course, your podcast will be a brilliant start, but it's just, how would you approach somebody?
If you thought they needed help.
Yes.
Great question. Phil, have you got an answer straight away?
Yeah, So you need to sort of step in with your bravery, really. What I mean by your bravery is to first of all, but potentially you're feeling that this person wants to talk about something. And you maybe potentially want to have that conversation with that man about checking in. Are you all right over there? Are you okay? So it really takes you to, conjure up the bravery just to sort of find a space where you're not in a busy bar, you're not in a noisy place, and you can just say to that guy, I just want to check in with you. Like, is everything okay? How is everything over there for you at the moment? It's like checking in with the weather. It's not like, how are you? Tell me how you are. Because that's almost like, whoa, it's too fast. We have a saying in coaching, which is like, meet people where they are. So you meet them where they are, which is what we mean psychologically speaking, but you just like, okay, how are you doing over there? Just let's have 5 minutes. Go out for a walk, like Jamie and I were saying in one of our podcasts. Go out for a walk together. How are you doing over there? I'm just checking in and seeing how you're doing. Just a rain check. That's how I might approach it. If this person wasn't kind of familiar with having that sort of conversation, and might think like, well, why are you asking? I feel a bit kind of encroached upon. What have I been saying? What have I been leaking psychologically that makes you think that? I'm sure they wouldn't respond in that way, but kind of make it super easy and super safe for them to be able to share.
Just to add to that courage piece is dare to stay long enough in the uncomfortableness of being there for that person. Because it can be a courageous thing to ask someone how they are and they give that sort of surface level answer. If you dare to stay long enough, really long enough, and curious for long enough to try and get into there, that's where the pain or the discomfort or the real juice is. So it's like, dare to stay in the uncomfortableness for a little bit longer in service of that person, and I think then you'll really build some beautiful connection.
Yeah, I love that, man. And also just levels of listening. We have a podcast which is on levels of listening, and what we do in our particular modality of coaching, there's a level of listening called level 2 listening, which is like all of my deep curiosity is over there on you at the moment. It's like shining a light on that individual. So what I would offer up to you, if you've never tried this before, is to listen longer than you imagine you would normally listen for. So just ask the question, an open question. Also got a podcast on that. Ask the open question, and then just allow that person just to keep talking. And don't feel like you have to chip in. Don't feel like you have to go aha, or nod or anything like that.
Or fix.
Yeah, the words will come.
It's the power of silence, I think, isn't it? It's struggling to have that pause and that discomfort when you need it. We have to do it with patients sometimes too. It's we all like to fill those gaps, I think.
Yeah.
I think
we want to make it right for that person. We want to go, okay, that's great. Right, let's go for a drink. Like turn the speed down on the whole experience. Turn it right down. Slow it right down. Connect. I keep doing this, but this is where it is. This in heart connection. Connect your heart with their heart, and feel it, stay. Yeah, and really feel it. Yeah, great question.
I often find that unfortunately, the world does make you ask the superficial question. I mean, I must do it, multiple times every single day with every single patient. They come in and I go, "How are you?" And they always answer in exactly the same way. "I'm fine. How are you?" And I always go, "I'm great. Let's try it again. How are you really?" And as soon as that second time, they always again respond in the same way. They kind of take a step back and go, "I have to answer a real question with a real answer." And then they take the second, and I just wait.
Yeah.
And you just pause, and it's amazing how after that pause they'll go, "Well, actually, I'm really stressed." And then they wait to see if you're going to jump it, and you go, "Okay, and how does that affect you?" And before you know it, they kind of go, "Oh, that was okay to say that." And the next time they come in, I go, "How are you?" And they don't do the "I'm fine, how are you?" They actually answer with, "Well, actually, I'm very stressed." "Oh no, well, I'm okay. Can you tell me more?" And before you know it, it becomes almost, I don't even ask the question. They walk in and they go, "I'm stressed." And it becomes then really safe. And that's
permission, exactly. You've created safety and given them permission to say more than, I'm fine.
But it does make you more and more dislike the kind of the modern world that we do ask this almost ridiculous question when we see everyone. And it's kind of like you just go, I'm fine, walk on.
Arbitrary.
Why did we do that then? What was the point in that? We created a very society kind of, I don't know. We don't really want to know about each other.
It's appropriateness, like I was saying before. And the appropriate answer, the appropriate version is, and she probably doesn't want to burden you. It's all in here. And you ask, she doesn't want to just go, well, actually, as you have asked, because she maybe thinks that she's going to burden you with her problems. And
I think that's a common conception. I think the feeling of burdening others, the feeling that you're going to upset others with your emotions, that's a common feeling that people have.
It's the number one reason why men don't share, why men don't talk. That's the number one reason, because they don't want to burden other men with their problems, and they don't want to seem weak. Is number two.
Yeah, I would have gone with the weakness one, definitely. I would have always thought that. And yet I would say most women would think more of men for actually telling you. So just from a different perspective,
that connection is important.
Around. I don't know. I think if we see a little weakness, we're kind of like, oh, you're human.
But it also makes us closer to people.
Yeah,
when we share our connect about our pain and our things that are bothering us, it makes us closer to someone. It improves that connection.
Yeah. How many comments do we get on iTunes from women about our podcast?
All of them except one.
Yeah, all of them. This is great, man.
I'm going to play this to my husband. He needs to listen.
Well, yeah, actually, that's exactly what I thought. I thought I should play this to my husband.
Well, that's great. Men's health via osmosis. That's how it works. I was just going to say, one of the tools that we use as coaches, and it's quite a fundamental and quite one of the tools we use very early on, is a wheel of life. And probably most people have come across it now. It's quite commonplace. But oftentimes if coaches say to other coaches, if I say to my friends, how are you doing? We'll ask specifically about a specific channel or realm of life. So this wheel of life is a circle which is subdivided into 8 chunks or 8 sections. And it could be like personal development, relationships, health. And we sort of say, okay, a bit like a Trivial Pursuit thing. How are you doing in your physical world? Like, how are you feeling in that way at the moment? And we might sort of introduce a scale of between 0 and 10. If you had to rate it on a degree of fulfillment, like how are you feeling right now? Not a degree of how good or bad it is, but the degree of fulfillment that you're feeling in your spiritual or transpersonal sort of realm, your feeling of purpose. How are you doing over there? Yeah. Which is very coachy speak, but it actually makes talking about things which are very nebulous and meta much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. It gives something physical there that you can use as a prop as well. It's always good to have some props, I think. Some things that people can use to help them feel it's normal.
Well, if someone's on a 2,
Yeah.
the second part to that is, well, what do you need to do to get to a 5 or a 6? What do we need to do?
It shows them it's an upward journey too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what does a 5 or a 6 look like? If you were to get that to a 5 or a 6, what would that look like?
Here's-
Then it
here's
gets them out of here and down into here, and they can feel it, and go, oh yeah, that would be great if I could get to a 5. If I get to a 5, that would be, and then that's the conversation. That's where then the conversation goes into that, and it's like make believe, and then there's actions that can be taken. So
just a basic takeaway version of this, without going too deep into the wheel of life, which could be a further conversation if you wanted it to be. Jamie and I do this thing called the quad check-in now and again, which is a really quick thing that anyone can do. And you say, okay, so how you doing, mate? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, right. So let's just quad check in, as in like, how are you feeling emotionally, physically, psychologically, and spiritually? So in essence, and spiritually doesn't mean in touch with God or anything. It means how is your peace of mind? How's your mental health? How are you on a kind of bigger picture scheme? Where do I feature in the world? What's my identity? How am I feeling? So it's a really good way of doing it, because I can easily go, okay, so physically today I'm feeling between a 1 and 5. I'm feeling a 2, maybe a 3. And you can just calibrate. It's like a litmus test. And it kind of gives you a really good ability to be able to kind of briefly, quickly check in without just going, I'm fine, when you're not fine, blatantly. No one's fine. Yeah. We use that a lot, don't we, Jamie?
It's a really great. I think that's a really great thing that people can use. Yeah, I think that's really good.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions, really. So essentially, I understand from coaching that it's all about looking pretty much towards the future, isn't it? So I'm assuming this involves having a plan or a path. How would you go about helping someone to create that? It's going to be easy question.
In a short,
but not an easy question.
No, it's a difficult one to say short.
It's a great question. So coaching is like an arc. If you imagine like an arc of time, so you start at the beginning and then you get to the end, and the arc is finished. So in the beginning of a coaching relationship, we look at what you're going to come to coaching with. We spend an hour and a half deep diving and really like getting messy and sketching everywhere and making a real mess, so that we get this big pile of stuff and we go, right, where are we going to go from here? And that gives the client full kind of playfulness to sort of, they might come with one thing, but actually after an hour and a half of coaching and getting messy, they go, actually, it's not that, it's this. And then we go off in that, and that sets the compass in the right direction to sort of begin that arc. And over an arc of, I work with a client for 3 months, fortnightly. And so that arc that compass is constantly being recalibrated all the way along until we get to the other side. So we don't necessarily create a map. I don't create a map. That map keeps getting recalibrated as we go.
Yeah, that's a great description, I think.
Do you ever find that men sometimes worry that kind of their problems are more trivial? That, someone's got it worse, or they don't want to kind of appear selfish. They don't want to unlock it because they think, well, my life can't be as bad as somebody else's.
Yeah.
So they kind of have that rating scale with somebody else, maybe.
So they don't want to complain in a way.
Yeah.
I think there's a misconception with because gratitude is very much kind of, mindfulness and gratitude are very much in the know now. So people are sort of vaguely aware of what gratitude and mindfulness are, on a kind of label. But actually, when it comes to gratitude, or you should feel lucky with what you've got, I think sometimes that can be misused, and men particularly can misfire with that. It's like, okay, so I am grateful. I've got my health. I've got this. I've got that. All going well for me, and I should feel lucky when next door, they've got emphysema or something like that, or they're lonely. And it still doesn't take away from the fact that maybe you're struggling right now. Maybe psychologically you're feeling really depressed or low right now. It is not trivializing what it is you're experiencing. They have that old phrase from years ago, we've all got our own cross to bear. I think it's really true. We have an experiential feeling with what we're living in our own life, and that can feel really overwhelming. It doesn't matter the enormity of it. So like pain is pain and discomfort is discomfort, however you experience it.
Yeah.
So just because your problem it feels like a small one in the greater scheme of things doesn't mean you're feeling it any less. Yeah.
There we go. I suppose really it's all just about starting the conversation, regardless of where you feel you are on the spectrum. It's just having the conversation, and that really is basically what we very much enjoy talking about today, is just to have a conversation. Thank you very, very much, both of you, for coming on. We can't wait to have more conversations in the future, because this really is a topic that is
Fascinating.
absolutely fascinating to us. And thank you again.
And it's really important to us. It's really this is why we do the podcast. It's why we work with the people that we work with, because it's really important that we get this.
And we encourage everybody to listen to your podcast, because it's absolutely brilliant. Really, really great.
Thank you.
Season 2 is on the horizon as well.
Yes, excellent. I look forward to it.
Excellent, brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you again, and we can't wait to talk to you again soon.